Ryan's office revenge. The conference room door slammed so hard the coffee cups rattled on the mahogany table. I'm Jordan Peterson, 49 years old, and I'd just watched a 28-year-old kid destroy what I'd spent 6 months building. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me back up. I've been in the defense contracting game for 23 years, ever since I left the Navy as a lieutenant commander. Started as a junior analyst at Hartman Defense Industries and worked my way up to Senior VP of Strategic Partnerships. When you've got that kind of experience, especially with a military background, you learn to read people fast. You learn when someone's bluffing, when they're scared, and when they're about to make the biggest mistake of their career. Bryce Hartman III was about to make that mistake, and he was dragging a $2.8 billion deal down with him. The air in that boardroom always smelled like leather and fear, but that Thursday morning it reeked of something else. Arrogance mixed with inexperience. Bryce had just been named CEO after his daddy stepped down to pursue other interests, which in corporate speak means the board finally got tired of his golf habit. Bryce was making changes. Big ones. The kind that usually sink companies. But hey, he had a Stanford MBA and a tech background, so what did an old Navy guy like me know? I was standing by the window, reviewing the final details of our biggest deal ever, a $2.8 billion acquisition of Nash Military Solutions. This wasn't just any merger. Nash owned contracts with the Pentagon that went back 3 decades. Colonel Reed Williams, their founder, was old-school military like me. We'd served in different theaters, him in Iraq, me in the Persian Gulf. But we spoke the same language. We understood the same codes about honor, integrity, and the weight of responsibility that comes with defense contracts. See, defense contracting isn't like selling widgets or software. When you're dealing with equipment and services that keep soldiers alive, every handshake matters. Every relationship is built on trust that took years to establish. You don't just email a general at the Pentagon. You don't send automated invoices for missile guidance systems. Everything runs on personal relationships and proven reliability. That's when Bryce made his entrance. Jordan, we need to talk. He wasn't alone. Had his assistant with him, some kid fresh out of business school who looked like he was about to witness an execution. Smart kid, he probably was. I turned around, keeping my voice level the way they taught us in officer training. What can I do for you, Bryce? He was holding a tablet, swiping through what looked like performance metrics and organizational charts. Your methods are outdated. This whole relationship-based approach, the handshake deals, the old boys network, it's not scalable in today's business environment. We're moving to data-driven partnerships and automated client management systems. I almost laughed. You want to talk about data-driven with a 70-year-old Marine colonel who still carries a flip phone and writes notes on paper because he's seen too many enemy hackers breach secure systems. Data-driven partnerships with Colonel Williams, I asked. Bryce, the man doesn't even trust email for anything more sensitive than lunch plans. Exactly my point. Bryce stepped closer, and I could smell his expensive cologne. Colonel Williams needs to understand we're a modern company. We use CRM systems, automated processes, digital signatures. None of this meeting at the country club nonsense. It's inefficient, and frankly, it looks unprofessional to our other stakeholders. The room went quiet, except for the hum of the air conditioning. I looked at this kid. Really looked at him, designer suit that cost more than most people make in a month, shoes that had never seen a scuff mark, hands that had never changed a tire, dug a foxhole, or held anything heavier than a golf club. Bryce, I said slowly, Colonel Williams doesn't trust digital signatures because he's personally seen enemy hackers compromise Pentagon systems during active operations. He doesn't use email for sensitive discussions because he knows foreign intelligence services are reading everything. He meets at the country club because it's the one place he knows isn't bugged, and because 40 years of military service taught him that your word means everything. Bryce waved his hand dismissively. Paranoid old-timer thinking? We're not in the Cold War anymore, Jordan. This is 2024. We need to embrace innovation and efficiency. That's when I knew this kid was going to get people killed. Not metaphorically, literally. When you're dealing with defense contracts, paranoia keeps soldiers alive. When you're supplying equipment to forward operating bases, that old-timer thinking is the difference between gear that works and gear that fails when lives are on the line. Look, Bryce continued, consulting his tablet again, I've reviewed your personnel file. You're 49, no college degree, military background. The company's evolving past that model. We need VPs who understand technology, who can speak the language of innovation and digital transformation. I felt something cold settle in my chest. After 23 years, after every successful negotiation, every crisis I'd handled, every relationship I'd built, this kid was reducing me to demographics on a spreadsheet. No college degree, because I'd been too busy serving my country. Military background, like it was some kind of liability instead of the exact experience you need in defense contracting. What are you saying, Bryce? He straightened his tie, trying to look authoritative. I'm saying your services are no longer aligned with our strategic vision. Security will escort you out. The words hung in the air like smoke from a burning bridge. His assistant was staring at his shoes, probably calculating how fast he could update his resume and distance himself from this train wreck. You're firing me? 2 days before the biggest merger in company history? Claire Rodriguez from Analytics will handle the transition. She has an MBA from Wharton and understands our digital frameworks. She's been shadowing the project for weeks. I knew Claire. Good kid, smart as a whip, been with the company exactly 8 months. She understood spreadsheets and algorithms like nobody's business. She could build financial models that would make a Wall Street analyst weep with joy. But she didn't understand that Colonel Williams would take one look at her youth and inexperience and walk away from the table before she finished her PowerPoint presentation. But I didn't argue. You don't survive 23 years in defense contracting by making emotional decisions when the deck gets stacked against you. You survive by staying calm when everything goes sideways, by thinking 3 moves ahead while your opponent is still celebrating their first move. Understood, I said. I'll clean out my office. Bryce blinked. He'd expected pushback, maybe begging, certainly some kind of emotional outburst. Instead, I just nodded and headed for the door. Military training runs deep. When you get new orders, even bad ones, you acknowledge and adapt. As I reached for the handle, I turned back. One question, Bryce. Do you have top-secret clearance? He looked confused, like I'd asked him about quantum physics. Why would I need that? I'm not handling classified materials. That's what the security department is for. I smiled. No reason. Just curious. My office felt different as I packed my things. 23 years of relationships, crisis management, and closed deals reduced to 2 cardboard boxes. The framed photo of my destroyer, the USS Nimitz, taken during my last deployment. The challenge coins from various admirals and generals, each one representing a relationship, a favor earned, trust built over years. The handwritten thank you note from the Secretary of Defense, when I'd helped navigate a procurement crisis that could have delayed critical equipment to troops in Afghanistan. But there was one thing I didn't pack, my security clearance badge. That little piece of plastic with my photo and clearance level wasn't just an ID card. It represented something Bryce couldn't buy, couldn't download, couldn't innovate around, and certainly couldn't delegate to an MBA analyst. It represented trust earned through decades of service, background investigations that went back to my high school teachers, and a proven track record of handling the nation's secrets responsibly. Claire appeared in my doorway, looking like she was about to cry. "Mr. Peterson, I'm so sorry. This is insane. The meeting with Colonel Williams is tomorrow morning, and I don't know anything about the Montana land clause or the submarine contract addendums. I've read the files, but there are handwritten notes I can't decipher, and some of the contract language references agreements that aren't in the digital records. You'll figure it out, Claire. You're smart." I paused, looking at her earnest face. "But when you meet the colonel, remember, he lost 17 men in a convoy attack in Fallujah. He doesn't make small talk about the weather, and he doesn't trust people who haven't earned it." Her face went pale. 17 men? I didn't know that was in his background. It's not in any file, Claire. It's something you learn by sharing a drink with him and listening to his stories. It's why he insists on meeting contractors face to face. It's why he wants to look you in the eye before he trusts you with equipment that might save or cost American lives. Security showed up exactly on time. Rex Sullivan from the executive team was with them, looking embarrassed as hell. Rex was former Army, served 2 tours in Iraq before getting his business degree. He knew what this meant, understood the implications of firing your only Pentagon liaison 48 hours before the biggest defense deal in company history. "Jordan, this is wrong," he whispered as we walked to the elevator. "The kid doesn't understand what he's doing. The board doesn't even know about this yet. This is going to be a disaster." "No," I said. "He doesn't understand. But he's about to get a very expensive education." The lobby felt like a funeral march. People I'd worked with for years were pretending not to see me, too uncomfortable or scared to acknowledge what was happening. Word travels fast in a defense contractor. Everyone knew that if they could fire Jordan Peterson for arbitrary reasons, nobody was safe. I went home to my house in Arlington, opened a beer, and sat on my back porch where I could see the Pentagon in the distance. My phone was buzzing constantly. Missed calls from suppliers, Pentagon contacts, industry journalists who'd caught wind of my departure. Defense contracting is a small community, and news like this spreads faster than wildfire. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I pulled out my old address book. Not the digital one on my phone, the leather-bound book I'd carried for 2 decades. Names, numbers, and handwritten notes about people who mattered in the defense world. People who trusted handshakes more than contracts, who measured relationships in years rather than quarterly reports. I found Colonel Williams's personal number, not his office line, but the cell phone he carried in his shirt pocket, the one he answered even during congressional hearings. I dialed the number and waited. "Peterson?" His voice was gravelly, suspicious. Caller ID in the military world meant something. "Thought we were meeting tomorrow at Hartman." "Change of plans, sir. I'm no longer with Hartman Defense." The silence on the other end stretched long enough for me to take 2 sips of beer. Then, "They fired you, Jordan Peterson, 2 days before signing? New leadership, new vision. They're sending a young analyst to handle the transition. Fresh MBA, very enthusiastic about digital transformation." The colonel's laugh was harsh, like gravel in a cement mixer. "After 6 months of negotiations, they're sending a stranger? What kind of outfit is Hartman running over there? The kind that thinks technology can replace trust, sir." "Well, hell," I could hear him thinking, probably pacing around his office the way he did when he was working through a problem. "Jordan, you interested in some consulting work? Nash Military Solutions could use someone with your background on our transition team." I took a long sip of beer and watched the sun set behind the Pentagon. "What did you have in mind, Colonel? How about you help me understand why I shouldn't walk away from this deal entirely?" That night I didn't sleep much. I was too busy thinking about security clearances, government regulations, and all the things Bryce Hartman didn't know he didn't know. See, when you're acquiring a defense contractor, especially one with classified government contracts, It's not like buying a software company or a restaurant chain. There are rules written in blood and bureaucracy that go back decades. You need someone with appropriate security clearance to oversee the transition. Not just secret clearance, top secret. And not just anyone with top secret clearance, but someone the Pentagon trusts to handle sensitive transitions without compromising ongoing operations. Someone with what they call need-to-know authority across multiple classified programs. Bryce had never needed clearance because Daddy had always handled the government side while he played with the commercial contracts. Claire had clearance, but only secret level, and she'd never managed a classified transition. Rex Sullivan had the right clearance, but was CFO, not strategic partnerships. And the Pentagon doesn't appreciate people operating outside their designated roles when national security is involved. I had top secret clearance with special access programs, 23 years of Pentagon relationships, and as of yesterday, no employment agreement with Hartman Defense Industries that could create a conflict of interest. The next morning at 7 a.m. sharp, I was sitting in Colonel Reed Williams' office at Nash Military Solutions. The office looked like a museum of military history. Battle ribbons from Iraq and Afghanistan, photos with 4 different secretaries of defense, a flag signed by every member of his unit, and a piece of twisted metal from a roadside bomb that had missed his convoy by 50 yards. "Jordan," the colonel said, pouring coffee from a pot that looked like it had survived several wars. "I've been thinking about our conversation. This Hartman situation has me concerned about more than just their competence. If they're making arbitrary personnel decisions 48 hours before closing, what other surprises might we discover after the ink dries?" I nodded. In the Navy, we had a saying, "You don't change navigators in the middle of a typhoon." Bryce just threw his navigator overboard because he didn't like his uniform. Exactly. So here's what I'm thinking. I want you as Director of Strategic Integration at Nash, starting immediately. Your job is to evaluate this merger from our perspective and advise me on whether Hartman Defense Industries is a company we want to join or a company we want to avoid. The irony was beautiful. Hartman was trying to acquire Nash, but now Nash was evaluating Hartman. "What's the compensation, Colonel?" "Double what they were paying you, plus equity. And your first assignment is to sit in on this morning's meeting when Hartman's new team comes to present their transition plan. By 9 a.m., the calls were coming every 15 minutes to my personal phone. Bryce, Rex, even Old Man Hartman himself calling from his retirement golf course in Florida. But I was busy helping Colonel Williams prepare for his morning meeting with Hartman Defense. The meeting where he'd decide whether to proceed with the acquisition or send them packing. Claire arrived right on time at 10 a.m., looking professional, but nervous. She'd obviously prepared thoroughly, had all her digital presentations ready, printed backup copies, and even brought a tablet loaded with financial projections. Bryce showed up with her, trying to project confidence, but looking like a man who'd spent the night realizing he might have made a catastrophic mistake. Colonel Williams sat behind his desk like a granite monument. On the wall behind him, those photos of him with senior Pentagon officials suddenly looked less like decorations and more like a resume of people who trusted his judgment. "Ms. Rodriguez," the colonel said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who'd commanded men in combat. "I understand you're handling the transition now." "Yes, sir. I've reviewed all the files thoroughly, and I'm confident we can streamline the integration process using our new digital platforms." Claire's voice was steady, professional. She was good at her job, but this wasn't really her job. Bryce jumped in, unable to let his subordinate carry the conversation. "Colonel, we're excited to bring Nash into the 21st century. Cloud-based systems, automated reporting, real-time analytics. We'll modernize your operations while preserving your core competencies." The colonel nodded slowly, like a judge listening to closing arguments. "And security protocols for classified materials?" "State of the art," Bryce assured him. Military-grade encryption, biometric access controls, blockchain verification systems. We're implementing the same security measures used by Fortune 500 companies. I see. And who will oversee the classified contract transitions? Claire checked her notes, though she'd obviously memorized every detail. I'll be handling that personally, sir. I have secret clearance and I've completed additional training in classified material handling procedures. Secret clearance. The colonel's voice could have frozen helium. Ms. Rodriguez, are you aware that 60% of our contracts require top secret oversight for any ownership changes? I watched Bryce's face change color from confident tan to worried pale. We can get additional clearance approved through the normal channels. Son, the colonel said, and something in his tone made it clear this was not a term of endearment. Top secret clearance takes 18 months minimum for approval, assuming no complications in the background investigation. These contracts transfer in 30 days, or we're in breach with the Pentagon and the deals are void. The room went dead quiet, except for the hum of fluorescent lights. There must be someone at Hartman with appropriate clearance, Claire said desperately, probably running through personnel files in her head. Colonel Williams glanced at me. I was sitting in the corner, taking notes on Nash letterhead, wearing a visitor's badge that identified me as Director of Strategic Integration. There was. You fired him yesterday. Bryce spun around, finally noticing me sitting there. His face went through about 5 different expressions in 3 seconds. Surprise, recognition, anger, and finally, dawning horror. What is he doing here? Mr. Peterson is Nash's new Director of Strategic Integration. He'll be overseeing our side of any potential transition, assuming we decide to proceed. The kid looked like he'd swallowed a live grenade. This is sabotage. Jordan's creating a conflict of interest. Colonel Williams stood up slowly, and when a 6'4" Marine colonel stands up, everyone else in the room suddenly feels smaller. Mr. Hartman, yesterday your company told me that experienced military personnel like Mr. Peterson were outdated. Today you're upset that I hired him myself. Which is it? But the merger will proceed only if Hartman Defense can demonstrate competent oversight of classified transitions. Since you terminated your only qualified person and handed him to your acquisition target, I'd say that's unlikely. Bryce was sweating now, his expensive cologne mixing with the smell of desperation. We can work this out. Jordan, name your price to come back. Double your salary, stock options, whatever you want. I looked up from my notes, pen poised like I was considering his offer. I'm not available, Bryce. I have a new job. The deal dies without proper clearance oversight, the colonel continued, his voice carrying the finality of a court-martial verdict. Pentagon won't approve the transition without trusted supervision. That's not personal. That's federal regulation written in the Defense Federal Acquisition Regulation Supplement. Claire was frantically typing on her phone, probably researching clearance requirements she should have known 6 months ago. Smart kid, but she was learning a hard lesson about the difference between book knowledge and real-world experience. Colonel, Bryce tried one more time, his voice cracking slightly. Surely we can find a solution. There has to be another way. I'm sure you can find a solution, but it won't be with Nash Military Solutions. Williams walked to the door and opened it. The acquisition is terminated, effective immediately. We'll find a buyer who understands the defense sector. As they filed out, Bryce stopped at my chair. This isn't over, Jordan. I smiled up at him. You're right, Bryce. It's just beginning. Within 4 hours, Nash Military Solutions had 3 competing offers from defense contractors who understood the value of experience. Titan Defense Industries offered $2.9 billion. Lockheed's acquisition arm came in at $3.0 billion. General Dynamics, who'd been watching from the sidelines, swooped in with a $3.1 billion offer. $300 million more than Hartman was offering. Colonel Williams called me into his office that evening. "Jordan, Titan's offering you Senior VP Strategic Development if this deal goes through. Stock options, signing bonus, the works. What do you think?" I thought about Bryce's Stanford MBA and his digital transformation initiatives. I think it's time the defense industry remembered that some things can't be automated. Within a week, we'd accepted Titan's offer. My signing bonus alone was more than I'd made in 5 years at Hartman. But the real satisfaction came from something money couldn't buy. 2 months later, I was reading the Wall Street Journal over coffee when I saw the headline, "Hartman Defense Industries CEO replaced following failed merger." The article described how Bryce Hartman III had been transitioned to an advisory role by the board of directors, which in corporate speak means they fired him but let him keep some dignity and stock options. The article quoted an unnamed board member saying the company had lost confidence in current leadership's ability to navigate complex strategic partnerships. It mentioned that Hartman's stock price had dropped 22% since the failed Nash acquisition, and that several other potential deals had been put on hold pending leadership review. They offered me Bryce's job 6 months later. The board flew down to meet me at Titan's offices in Virginia, brought lawyers and compensation packages and promises about returning to core values. But I declined. See, I was too busy building something better. At Titan, I was leading the integration of 3 different defense contractors, managing relationships with Pentagon officials across 4 different branches, and training a new generation of military liaisons who understood that some bridges can't be rebuilt once they're burned. Claire Rodriguez, to her credit, reached out about a year later. She'd left Hartman and was working for a smaller defense contractor, handling logistics contracts. Smart kid. She'd learned that experience matters, but she'd also learned it the hard way. Rex Sullivan retired early and started consulting for veteran-owned businesses. He stops by my office occasionally, and we share war stories, both the military kind and the corporate kind. Last month, I was at the Pentagon for a quarterly review meeting when I ran into General Patricia Hayes, the Army's Deputy Chief of Staff for Logistics. She'd heard about the Hartman situation through the military grapevine, which is faster and more accurate than any intelligence network ever invented. "Peterson," she said, "heard you taught some young hotshot a lesson about respecting experience. Just reminded him that clearance can't be bought, General." She laughed. "Son, in my 30 years of service, I've seen a lot of young officers who thought they could revolutionize warfare with technology and fresh thinking. The smart ones learned to listen to their sergeants. The dumb ones got people killed. That conversation stuck with me. Because this whole story isn't really about corporate revenge or even about respecting military experience. It's about something deeper. I still drive past the Hartman building sometimes when I'm in that part of town. They've got new leadership, new strategies, new initiatives. The building looks the same, but I know the culture inside has changed. Word gets around in defense circles. Companies that don't value experience don't last long in a business where mistakes cost lives. Bryce Hartman learned an expensive lesson about the difference between disruption and destruction. In Silicon Valley, you can move fast and break things because you're dealing with apps and websites. In defense contracting, when you break things, people die. The defense industry taught me that some bridges are built over decades and can be destroyed in a single conversation. But it also taught me that experience isn't just about years on the job. It's about understanding that trust, once earned, becomes your most valuable asset, and wisdom, once dismissed, becomes your enemy's greatest weapon.